Hamlin towns in Brunswick, my famous Hanover city. The River Weser, deep and wide, washes its wall on the southern side. Pleasanter spot you've never spied, but when begins my ditty, almost 500 years ago. To see the townsfolk suffer so, from vermin was a pity. Rats, they fought the dogs and killed the cats and bit the babies in the cradles and ate the cheeses from the vats and licked the soup from the cook's own ladles. Split open the kegs of salted sprats, made nests in men's Sunday hats, and even spoiled the women's chat by drowning out their speaking with shrieking and squeaking in 50 different sharps and flats. At last the people in a body to the town hall came flocking. "'Tis clear," cried they, "our mayor is a naughty, and as for our corporation, shocking to think we buy gowns lined with ermine for dolts who can't or won't determine what's best to rid us of our vermin. You hope because you're old and obese to find in furry civic robes ease. Rouse up, sirs, give your brains a racking to find the remedy we are lacking, or sure as fate will send you packing." At this the mayor and corporation quaked with a mighty consternation. An hour they sat in council. At length the mayor broke silence. "For a guilder I'd my ermine gown sell. I wish I were a mile hence. It's easy to bid one brackman's brain. I'm sure my poor head aches again. I scratch it so, but all in vain. Oh, for a trap, a trap, a trap." Just as said this, what should hap? At the chamber door but a gentle tap. "Bless us," cried the mayor, "what's that?" With the corporation as he sat, looking little to wonder his fat. Nor brighter were his eyes, nor moister than a too long opened oyster, save when at noon his paunch grew mutinous for a plate of turtle green and glutinous. Only a scraping of shoes on a mat, anything like the sound of a rat makes my heart go pit-a-pat. "Come in," cried the mayor, looking bigger, and in did come the strangest figure. His long queer coat from heel to head was half yellow and half red, and he himself was tall and thin, with sharp blue eyes, each like a pin, and light loose hair and swarthy skin, nor tuft of hair on cheek, nor beard on chin. The lips or smile went out and in, there was no guessing his kith or kin, and nobody could enough admire this tall man in his quaint attire. Quoth one, "It's as my great-grandsire, starting up at the trump of doom's tone, had walked this way from his painted tombstone." He advanced towards the council table. "Please, your honor," said he, "I am able, by means of secret charm, to draw all the creatures living beneath the sun, that crawl or swim or fly or run, after me so as you never saw. And I chiefly use my charm on creatures that do people harm, the mole and toad and newt and viper. People call me the Pied Piper." And here they noticed round his neck a scarf of red and yellow stripe, to match with his coat of self-same check. And that scarf then hung a pipe, and his fingers they noticed were ever straying, as if impatient to be playing upon this pipe, as low it dangled over his vesture so old-fangled. "Yes," said he, "Pied Piper as I am, in Tartary I friendly cam, last June from his huge swarms of gnats. I ease in Asia than I am, of a monstrous brood of vampire bats. And as for what your brain bewilders, if I rid your town of rats, will you give me 1,000 guilders?" 50,000 was the exclamation of an astonished mayor and corporation. Into the street the piper stepped, smiling first a little smile, as if he knew what magic slept in his quiet pipe the while. Like a musical adept to blow his pipe, his lips he wrinkled, and green and blue his sharp eyes twinkled, like a candle flame where salt is sprinkled. And ere 3 shrill notes the pipe uttered, he heard as if an army muttered, and a muttering grew to a grumbling, and a grumbling grew to a mighty rumbling, and out of the houses came the rats tumbling. Great rats, small rats, lean rats, brawny rats, brown rats, black rats, grey rats, tawny rats, grave old plotters, gay young friskers, fathers, mothers, uncles, cousins, cocking tails and pricking whiskers, families by tens and dozens, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, followed the Pied Piper for their lives. From street to street he piped advancing, and step for step they followed dancing, until they came to the River Weser, wherein all plunged and perished, save one who stout as Julius Caesar, swam across and lived to carry, as he the manuscript he cherished, to Ratland home his commentary, which was, after shrill notes of the pipe, I heard a sound as of scraping tripe, and putting apples wondrous ripe into the cider presses gripe, and a moving away of pickle tub boards, and leaving a jar of conserve cupboards, and drawing the corks of train oil flasks, and breaking lips of butter casks. And it seemed as if the voice, sweeter far than by harp or by psalteries breathed, called out, "Oh, rats, rejoice! The world has grown to a vast dry saltery. So munch on, crunch on, take your nunch on, breakfast, supper, dinner, lunch on, and just a bulky sugar punch on, already staved, like a great sun shone, gracious scarce an inch before me, just methought its head come for me, I found the Wester rolling over me. You should have heard the Hamlin people ring the bells as they rock the steeple. Go, cried the man, get long poles, poke out the nest and block up the holes, consult with carpenters and builders, and leave in our town not even a trace of the rats. When suddenly up the face of the piper perked to the marketplace, with the first of these, my 1,000 guilders. 1,000 guilders. The mayor looked blue, so did the corporation too, for council dinners made rare havoc with Clary and myself in the Grand Hall. And half the money would replenish their seller's biggest bud of Rhenish, to pay this sum to a wondering fellow, with gypsy coat of red and yellow. Besides, quoth the mayor with a knowing wink, our business was done at the river's brink. We saw with our eyes the vermin sink, and what's dead can't come to life, I think. So, friend, we're not folks to shrink from our duty of giving you something to drink, and a matter of money to put in your poke. But as for the guilders, what we spoke of them, as you well know, was a joke. Besides, their losses have made us thrifty. 1,000 guilders, come, take 50. The piper's face fell and he cried, no trifling, I can't wait beside. I promised to visit by dinner time Baghdad, and accept the prime of the head cook's potage. All these richen, for having left in the caliph's kitchen, of a nest of scorpions, no survivor. With him I proved no bargain driver. With you don't think I'll bait a stiver. And folks who put me in a passion may find me pipe after another fashion. How, cried the mayor, do you think I brook, being restrained then a cook, insulted by a rival, with idle pipe and vegetable Bible? Threaten us, fellow, do your worst, blow your pipe there till you burst. Once more he stepped into the street, and to his lips again laid his long pipe a smooth straight cane. And ere he blew 3 notes, such sweet soft notes as yet musicians cunning never gave the enraptured air. There was a rustling that seemed like a bustling of merry crowds, justling at pitching and hustling. Small feet were pattering, wooden shoes clattering, little hands clapping, and little tongues chattering, like foals in a farmyard or barley scattering. Out came the children running, all the little boys and girls, with rosy cheeks and flaxen curls, and sparkling eyes and teeth like pearls, tripping and skipping her merrily after. The wonderful music was shouting and laughter. The mayor was dumb, and the council stood, as if they're changed into blocks of wood, unable to move a step or cry, till the children merrily skipping by could only follow with an eye that joyous crowd at the piper's back, and how the mayor was on the rack, and the wretched council's bosoms beat, as the piper turned from the high street, to where the Weser rolled its waters, right in the way of their sons and daughters. However, he turned from south to west, and took up a brick hill his steps addressed, and after him the children pressed. Great was the joy in every breast. He never crossed the mighty top, he's forced to let the piping drop, and we shall see our children stop. When lo, they reached the mountainside, a wondrous portal opened wide, as if a cavern was suddenly hollowed. The piper advanced, and the children followed. When all were into the very last, the door of the mountainside shut fast. Did I say all? No, one was lame, and could not dance the whole of the way. And in after years, if you'd blame his sadness, he was used to say, it's dull in our town since my playmates left. I can't forget that I'm bereft of all the pleasant sights they see, which the piper also promised me. For he led us, he said, to a joyous land, joining the town in jest at hand, where waters gushed and fruit trees grew, and flowers went forth a fairer hue, and everything was strange and new. The sparrow was brighter peacock here, and their dogs outran our fellow deer, and honeybees had lost their stings, and horses were born with eagle's wings. And just as I became assured my lame foot would be speedily cured, the music stopped, and I stood still, and found myself outside the hill, left behind against my will, to go now limping as before, and never hear of that country more. Alas, alas, for Hamelin, there came into many a burner's pate a text which says at heaven's gate, opes the rich at his easy rate, as the needle's eye takes a camel in. The mayor sent east, west, north, and south, to offer the piper by word of mouth, wherever was men's lot to find him, silver and gold to his heart's content, if only he'd return the way he went, and bring the children behind him. But when they saw it was lost endeavor, the piper and dancers were gone forever, they made a decree that lawyers never should take their records dated duly, if after the day of the month and year these words do not as well appear. And so long after what happened here, on the 22nd of July, 1376, the better in memory to fix the place of the children's last retreat, they called it the Pied Piper Street, where anyone playing pipe or tabor was sure for his future lose his labor, nor suffered they hostel or tavern, shocked with mirth a street so solemn, and opposite the place of the cavern, they wrote the story on a column, and on great church window painted, the same to make the world acquainted, how the children were stolen away, and there it stands this very day. And I must not omit to say, in Transylvania there is a tribe of alien people who ascribe the way and dress of which their neighbors lay such stress to their fathers and mothers having risen out of some subterranean prison into which they were Japan a long time ago in a mighty band out of Hamlin towns in Brunswick land, but how or why they don't understand. So, Lily, let me and you be wipers, scores out with old men, especially pipers. And if they should pipe us free from rats and mice, if we promise them aught, let us keep our promise. Just clear my throat first. was once a young man named Roland Pye who played the recorder when he wasn't baking bagels. One day he was walking through a park and playing his recorder to rest a while from all his baking when suddenly he spied a corpse lying on the ground beneath a swarm of flies. He put down his recorder, walked over to the corpse, shooed the flies away, and covered the dead man with stones. Returning to his oven later that day, he found that his oven blade had gone on by itself and already baked half the bagels he needed. From that day on, Roland Pye was the happiest baker alive. He would bake until he was tired, then he would pull his recorder out of his pocket while his oven blade went on by itself. But Roland Pye lived in a town whose mayor did not admire his skill and was jealous of his fame. So the mayor devised a plan to rid the town of Roland. In the beginning, he said that Roland was a good worker, but lazy. Next, he said that Roland baked a whole lot, but badly. Then he accused Roland of being a sorcerer, and the people turned on him. Therefore, Roland Pye took his recorder and left his home behind. When Roland Pye came to a neighboring town, he went to all the business owners, but none of them would give him any work. Finally, he met an old busker and asked him for work to keep body and mind together. "Come along with me," said the old man, "and we will share alms." So Roland Pye and the old man started going around and singing, "Baker, why do you bear those silent things? Baker, how did you forget to stand where your feet are? Baker, no woman loves your wealth, although it is golden and good for her health. Baker, you are too dirty for a lover to wish to preen. Your limbs are the knots and cords of an old-fashioned machine. Baker, line the rings and bash the boards. You don't need their applause for a thing that is yours. You are a baker, and are what you are, not by a miracle, but by the work of your arms. Baker, be who you are." Everybody gave alms to the old man, but to Roland they said, "What is a young man like you out begging? Why don't you work for a living?" "Nobody will hire me," replied Roland Pye. "That's what you say. There is a king with so many hungry soldiers that he'll pay good wages to anyone willing to feed them." So Roland Pye went to the king's kitchen and took the old man whose alms he'd been sharing. The oven had never been used by anyone. Roland mixed the dough, then he rolled it into rings. Then he boiled them, dressed them, and baked them until they're golden brown. Then he tossed them into a crate to cool down. Whenever Roland wearied of baking, he would play his recorder. And once he was weary of playing his recorder, he would sing, "Baker, why do you bear those silent things? Baker, how did you forget to stand where your feet are? Baker, no woman loves your wealth, although it is golden and good for your health. Baker, you are too dear for a lover to wish to preen. Your limbs are the knots and cords of an old-fashioned machine. Baker, line the rings and bash the boards. You don't need their applause for a thing that is yours. You are a baker and are what you are, not by a miracle, but by the work of your arms. Baker, be who you are." Hearing the singing, a princess looked out the window. She saw Roland Pye and fell in love with him. But she was a princess and he a baker. The king would never consent to their marriage. So they decided to run away together. They fled at night. They fled in a boat at night. When they were already on the high seas, Roland remembered the busker. He said to his beloved, "We must fetch the old man, since he shared his alms with me. We can't go off and leave him like that." At that very moment, the old man came up behind the boat, walking on the water as though it had been dry land. Reaching the boat, he said, "We agreed to divide everything we had, and I shared everything I own. Now you have the king's daughter and must give half of her to me." At this, he gave Roland Pye a knife to cut his bride in two. Roland Pye took the knife with a trembling hand. "You are right," he said. "You are perfectly right. He was on the point of cutting his bride in half, when suddenly the old man stopped him. "Stop! I knew you were a just man. I am the dead man, mind you, whom you covered with stones. Go now, and may the two of you always be happy." The old man walked away on the waves. The boat came to an island rich in all good things, with a princely palace awaiting the newlyweds. Now was rolling pied in the oven blade. My first thought was he lied in every word, that hoary cripple with malicious eye, asking to watch the working of his lie on mine, and most scarce able to afford suppression of the glee that first and scored its edge at one more victim gained thereby. What else should he be set for with the staff? What saved to waylay with his lies and snare all travelers who might find him posted there? And asked the road, I guessed what skull-like laugh would break, what crutch can write my epitaph for pastime in the dusty thoroughfare. If at his counsel I should turn aside into ominous track which all agree hides the dark tower, yet acquiescently I did turn as he pointed, neither pride nor home were kindling at the end descried, so much as gladness some end might be. For what my whole world wide wondering, what with my search drawn out through years, my hope dwindled into a ghost not fit to cope with that obstreperous joy success would bring. I hardly tried now to rebuke the spring my heart made, finding failure in its scope. As a sick man very near to death seems dead indeed, and feels beginning in the tears, the pinch fell well of each friend, and here's one bid the other go, draw breath freely outside, since all is over, he saith, and the blow fallen no grieving can amend. While some discuss if near the graves be room enough for this, and when a day suits best for carrying the corpse away, with care about banners, scarfs, and staves, and still the man hears all and only craves, he may not shame such tender love and stay. Thus I had for so long suffered in his quest, heard failure prophesied so oft being writ, so many times among the band wit. The knights who to dark towers search address their steps, that just to fail as they seem best, and all doubt was now should I be fit. So quiet as despair I turned from him, the hateful cripple, out of his highway into the path he pointed. All the day had been a dreary one at best, and dim was settling into its close, yet shot one grim red beard to see the plain catch its stray. For mark, no sooner was I fairly found, pledged the plain after a pace or two, then paused and throw backward a last view, over the safe road 'twas gone, grey plain all round, nothing but plain to the horizon's bound. I must go on, naught else remained to do. So on I went. I think I never saw such starving noble nature. Nothing throve, for flowers as well expect a cedar grove, but chortle and spurge according to their law, to propagate their kind of love. fur and treasure trove. No penury dirt to sing or base in some stream store where the land's portion. See or close your eyes, said nature peevishly. If nothing skills, I can't help my case. 'Tis last judgment, fire must cure this place. Calcine its claws and set my prisoners free. If there pushed any ragged thistle stalk above its mates, its head was chopped. The bents were jealous elves. What made holes and rents in the dog's heart's worth sleeve? Bruises to cloth, all hope of greenness. 'Tis a brute must walk, passion their life over the brute's intents. As for the grass, it grew as scarce as hair and leprosy. Thin, dry blades pricked the mud which underneath would not kneaded up with blood. One stiff, blind horse, as every bone is stare, stood stupefied however he came there. Thrust out past service in the devil's stud. Alive, he might be dead for aught I know, with red gaunt and callous neck strain, and shut eyes beneath the rusty mane. Seldom went such grotesqueness with such woe. I never saw a brute I hated so. He must have been wicked to deserve such pain. I shut my eyes and turned them on my heart. As a man calls for wine before he fights, I asked one drafted for earlier, happier sight. If really I could hope to play the part, think first, fight afterwards, a soldier's art. One taste of old times, that's all to rights. Not it. I fancied Cuthbert's reddening face beneath its garniture of curly gold. Dear fellow, till I almost felt him fold. An arm in mine to fix me to that place, that way he used. Alas, one night's disgrace. Oh, at my heart's new fire and left it cold. Giles, then, the soul of honor, there he stands, frank as 10 years ago, when knighted first. An honest man should dare, he said he durst. Good, but the scene shifts. Faw, what hangman's hand pinned to his breast the parchment. His own band reads it. Poor traitor, spit upon and cursed. Better this present than a past like that. Back therefore to my darkening path. No sound, no sight as far as the eye can strain. Will the night send a howl in our bat, I asked. When something on the dismal flat came to arrest my thoughts and change their train. A sudden little river crossed my path, as unexpected as a serpent came. No tides congenial through the glooms. This as it crossed by might have been a bath in the fiend's glowing hoop. To see the wrath of its black eddies be spat in flakes of spumes. So petty yet so spiteful, all along those scrubby alders kneeled over it. Drenched willows flung them headlong in a fit of rough despair. A suicidal throng, the river which had done them all the wrong. Whatever that was, rolled by, deterred no whit. Which while I forded, good saints, how I feared to set my foot upon a dead man's cheek. Each step or feel the spear I thrust to seek, for hollows tangled in his hair or beard. It may have been a water rat spear, but ugh, it sounded like a baby's shriek. Glad was I to reach other bank, now for a better country. Vain presage, who are the strugglers? What war did they wage? Whose savage trample could thus pad the dank soil to a plash? Toads in a poison tank, or wild cats in a red-hot cage. The fight must so have seemed in that foul cirque. What penned them there with all the plain to choose? No footsteps leading to that horrid muse. None out of it. Mad druids set to work their brains, no doubt, like galley slaves a Turk pits for his pastime Christians against Jews. And more than that, a furlong on, why there, what bad use was that engine for? That wheel, or brake not wheel, that harrow fit to reel men's bodies out like silk, with all the air of Tophet's tool, on earth left unware or brought to sharpen its rusty teeth of steel. Then came some stub ground, once a wood, next to marsh it would seem, now mere earth, desperate and done with, so the fool finds mirth, makes a thing and mars it, till his mood changes and off he goes, within a rude bog, clay and marsh, sand and stark black dirt. Now blotches rankling colored gay and grim, now patches where some leanness of the soils broke into moss or substances like boils. Then came a palsied oak, a cleft in him, a distorted mouth that splits its rim, gaping at death and dies while it recoils. As far as ever from the end, not in the distance, but the evening not, point my footsteps further at the thought, a great black bird, Apollyon's bosom's friend, sailed past or beat his wide wings dragon pen, that brushed my cap, perchance the guide I sought. For looking up where I somehow grew, the plain and given place all round of mountains with such names of grace, mere heights and heaps now stolen in view. How thus they surprised me solving you, how to get from there was no clear case. Yet half I seemed to recognize some trick of mischief had happened to me. God knows when, in a bad dream perhaps, here ended then progress his way, when in the very nick of giving up one more time came the click, as when the trap shuts you in the den. Burningly it came upon me all at once, this was the place. Those two hills crouched like two bulls, locked horn in fight, while to the left a tall scout mountain, Dun's daughter dozing at the very nunce, after a lifetime of training for the sight. What in the midst lay at the tower itself, the round squat turret, blind as a fool's heart, built of brown stone without a counterpart in the whole world. The tempest mocking elf points to the ship, and thus the unseen shelf he strikes on only when timbers start. Not see, because of night perhaps, why day came back for that. Behind it left a dying sunset, kindled through a cleft. The hills like two giants in the hunting lay, chin upon hand to see the game at bay. Now stab and end the creature who the heft. Not here, when noise was everywhere, told, increasing like a bell, names in my ears, of lost adventurers, my peers, how such was strong, and such was bold, and such was fortunate, yet each of old, lost one moment, now the woe of years. There they stood, ranged along the hillside met, to view the last of me, for a living frame, for one more picture in a sheet of flame. I saw them and knew them all, and yet, dauntless, a slug on to my lips I sat, and blew, child Roland to a dark tower came. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them to another, and assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature, nature's God, entitle them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments instituted among men, driving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and institute new government, laying its foundations on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light or transient causes. And experience accordingly hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer when evils are sufferable than right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they have become accustomed. But when long train of injuries and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces the design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. It has refused assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. was once a rich man who had just one son, and the boy was dearly loved by his father. As everybody knows, the greatest scourge on earth for a rich man is work. Therefore, when his son turned 14, the father decided to send him to school to learn the science of laziness. On the same street as the rich man, there lived a famous and highly respected professor who had never done a lick of work in his life he could get out of doing. The rich man called on him and found him stretched out in a garden. Found him stretched out in the garden beneath the fig tree. With a cushion under his head, a cushion under his back, and a cushion under his butt. Before talking to him, I must first see how he does, said the rich man to himself. And he hid behind a hedge to observe the man. The professor lay as still as a corpse, with his eyes closed shut, with his eyes closed. The only time he moved was that whenever he heard the thud of a ripe fig falling on the ground near where he lay. He'd reach slowly out, bring it to his mouth, and swallow it. Then he wouldn't stir again until another fig fell. This is just the professor my son needs, decided the rich man. He came out from his hiding place, introduced himself, and asked if the professor would teach his son the science of laziness. "Old man," answered the professor just above a whisper, "don't talk so much. It tires me to listen to you. If you want to bring your son up as you and I are, just send him to me." The rich man went home, took his son by the hand, thrust a feathered pillow under his arm, and led him to the garden. "I urge you," he told him, "to do everything you see this professor of idleness do." The boy, who already had an inclination for that particular science, also stretched out under the fig tree. Observing his teacher, he saw him reach for every fig that fell and bring it to his mouth. "Why should I work myself to death reaching for figs?" he thought. He lay there with his mouth wide open. Soon a fig fell into his mouth, and he let it go down slowly. Then he reopened his mouth. Another fig fell. This time it missed. He lay perfectly still and murmured, "Why so wide of the mark? Fig fall into my mouth." Seeing how wise his pupil was already, the professor said, "Go on now. You have nothing to learn from me. You can even teach me something." So the boy went home to his father, who thanked heaven for having Thank heaven for having given him such a smart son. That was the science of laziness. Got 2 batches out and 2 batches in. One day God said, this is what I'll do. I'll send down my son. I'll send him down to you to clear up this humpity-bumpity hullabaloo. His name will be Christ, and he'll never wear shoes. And his friends will all call him the King of the Jews. He didn't come in a plane. He didn't come in a jeep. He didn't come in the pouch of a high-jumping Vovic. He rode on the back of a black Saskatoon, the blackiest creature you ever could view. He rode in Jerusalem, home with the grumpy Jews, where false prophets were worshipped, some even in twos. There's Murray von Murr and Genghis von Wooz, the one you could worship taking a snooze. It's Christ spoke from a mound with a pile of ground, and people gathered around without making a sound. Thus he spake, sin in socks, socks full of sin. How shall he quiet this Jehovah din? Do unto others as others do unto you. That includes you, Timothy Foo. The one Pharisee said to another he knew, what shall we do about this uppity Jew? Wash him in wine and make him all clean, and into St. Vittle's crucifixion machine. Twirl the whirl and release the gavlees, and ingo the nails as fast as you please. And he said as he bled, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, because they walk through this world wearing two crappity shoes. Do you? Amen. Beauty of women, and wise heart's words, and men-at-arms and their nobility, the colloquies of love, the songs of birds, and handsome ships on the fast-running sea, the calmness of air as daybreak looms, and white snow falling on a windless day, a flowing brook, a meadow full of blooms, silver and gold and lapis in array,